everyone, welcome to today's webinar hosted by Ciphr. Today we're looking at back to basics with measuring DEI impact, that's diversity, equality and inclusion impact. It's great to have you with us today. I'm Catherine, I'm Ciphr's head of content. You might have seen me on a previous webinar, and I'm delighted to be joined by Anne Alcock, who's head of diversity here at Ciphr. Welcome, Anne, how are you?
Hi, I'm very well, thank you. Not appreciating the rain, but hope it's not rainy for everybody wherever you are.
Fantastic. Yeah, it's pretty dismal here today, I would say, as well, unfortunately. So before we get cracking, we'll just take a look at today's agenda. I'm going to take you through a little bit about Ciphr, just in case you haven't come across us before. And then Anne's going to dive into looking at the theme of this year's National Inclusion Week. So we're a couple of weeks ahead of that, but it's hopefully today we're going to give you some things to think about as we head towards the end of the month. As well as the DEI landscape, 5 questions that will shape your impact measurement activity. I'm also going to share some of the products and services that we offer here at Ciphr that might be useful in supporting your DEI efforts if you're interested in that. Please do get involved in today's webinar. Use the public chat to say hi and send in your questions. Look out for any of our polls. This webinar is being recorded and the recording will be emailed to you afterwards. So if there's anything you've missed or that you want to share with a friend or colleague, you'll be able to revisit that at your leisure. If you're new to Ciphr, we're a leading HR and people management software and services provider. You can see some of our offerings on screen. We offer things from central HR to payroll, that's payroll software and outsourced payroll, onboarding, recruitment and LMS solutions, as well as e-learning content, that's off-the-shelf and bespoke e-learning content, as well as our DEI consultancy division, which is headed up by Anne. We're trusted by more than 600 clients across the UK and over 1.5 million software users. A significant proportion of our team are former customers, so we really understand the challenges facing HR, payroll and DEI professionals and how to support you and make a difference. With that, I'm going to hand over to Anne and disappear for a bit. I'll see you all later. Thanks, Anne.
Thanks very much, Catherine, and hello everyone. Had a great message already from Martin, who says sorry he's in a sunny Highland, Perthshire, so very jealous about that, but I bet it's beautiful up in that part of the country. So thanks so much for coming along to the webinar today. So just by way of introduction, to sort of mention what we're going to be talking about this morning, as Catherine highlighted, National Inclusion Week is coming up very soon. Actually starts week commencing the 23rd of September. It is an annual event, and for many organisations it's an opportunity to really showcase and focus in on diversity, equity and inclusion work. So it is for many quite an important week of the year. There are lots of important weeks of the year, aren't there, in the DEI calendar, but this is, I think, helpful because it draws attention to very much sort of on a generic and a holistic level, gives us an opportunity to sort of refocus and take a refresh and take a look at how we're doing on DEI in general. So this year's topic for National Inclusion Week is Impact Matters. So we thought as part of that we'd take a look at this topic and we'd focus on some of the basics around how to measure DEI impact. After all, we need to know that we're making a difference, because otherwise what's the point in doing what we're doing? So what impact are we making? What difference are we making? I think the theme this year, Impact Matters, relates a little bit more broadly and messages that each one of us holds the potential to make a really important, profound, positive impact. And National Inclusion Week themselves, they say it's a call to action to everyone in your organisation, from leaders to inclusion professionals through to teams and individuals, to think about the impact that you can make and how you can influence diversity, equity and inclusion within your workplace. So the message is wide. the opportunities abroad around impact, and they're significant. But as I said, today we're focusing on how that impact is measured. And there are many overlapping and integrating elements to this conversation. We can only really just scratch the surface, but we want to present the big picture and highlight some of the key things that we would want to think about. So whether you're just starting out on that sort of measurement journey, or whether you have some measurement activities in place already, I do hope that the session this morning is going to offer some food for thought. So if we could have the next slide, please, Catherine. Thank you. So again, I've taken this relating to National Inclusion Week specifically. This is from the NIW website, and it's really a kind of statement about what they say about this year's theme. But I thought it was really insightful, and there are some very important words and phrases there that we need to think about, that bring us back to kind of the root of what it is, why we do what we do around D&I. So Impact Matters has a powerful message that centres around understanding, identifying and measuring impact on marginalised groups, taking actions that make for genuine, sustainable change. So, you know, we need to understand different perspectives, different experiences. We need to identify those and what they look like. We need to highlight them, and we need to speak about them. And we need to measure the impact on, very important, marginalised groups in our workplaces. And that marginalisation can come from all different reasons, result from all different backdrops and contexts. And marginalised groups, you know, we talk about specific groups, we talk about the protected characteristic groups under the Equality Act, but, you know, for your organisation, who are the marginalised groups? You know, it's not going to be exactly the same everywhere. So just think about that a little bit. And it's about taking actions that we can be sure are going to create genuine and sustainable change. And I think sometimes it's very easy for us to be so enthusiastically, passionately doing all our DEI stuff that we lose sight a little bit potentially of the purpose and the vision of what we're doing. Or maybe we can feel that there's a little bit of pressure to maybe tick a box, and that we need to bolster our DEI credentials, or we're more concerned about the optics of what we do, without really thinking about the difference that we're actually making, and maybe the integrity of the work that we're delivering. So I think with that in mind, it's sometimes helpful to reflect back onto your business case. Why are you collecting data? Why are you analysing it? Why are you reporting on it? Why are you acting on it? And again, some of this is going to be the same for each organisation, but you need to find your own business case. You need to find your own rationale and your reasons for why you're measuring, and why you're doing this stuff. So we can link that back to the drivers for knowing that we're building an inclusive culture and workplace, and that benefits employees, that benefits the business, that benefits customers or clients. But make sure that business case fits with the ethos and values of your organisation, and that your measurement activity also reflects that. Okay, so that's just a little bit of thinking on my part and the backdrop to National Inclusion Week. So, Catherine, I think we've got a quick poll. Okay, so if you would like just to respond to that, how confident are you that you effectively measure the impact of your EDI actions on marginalised groups?
I could just like pop in while people are having a chance to fill in the form. Like organisations that come to us for consultancy work and your support, where would they rank on this scale typically? I mean, like we'll find out the audience average in a minute, but who do you work with?
Yeah, I think it really varies. You know, I've been working with some organisations, sort of third sector organisations lately, and even though they're in the same sector, we have incredibly different, approaches to this and degrees of sophistication. I'm particularly talking around, the monitoring, collecting diversity data through diversity monitoring. And, I look at some organisations and I think, blimey, your terminology here is leaves a little bit to be desired. Yet for other organisations in that sector, it's quite nuanced and it's very thoughtful. So I don't think there's one size fits all, but we're all on a journey and we can all make improvements. And so hopefully that's what we can help with this morning.
Fantastic, thanks, Anne. That takes us exactly to the end of our poll. So you should see the results on your screen now. So actually, nobody rating themselves is very confident. We've got some 13% of you are confident, so great to have you with us, and that you feel that you have that confidence. And then a lot of you, maybe you can take comfort that you're not the only ones feeling only somewhat or not at all confident on that. I think that kind of fits with your experience, Alan. I'm not really surprised that the numbers come out like that, because I think if you are feeling unconfident in that area, that's exactly why you're with us today, hopefully, and that we can start to give you some pointers for moving forwards with that.
Yeah, that's great, and thank you for sharing that. And I think we can all learn from each other as well. So I would encourage you to pop stuff in the chat. There's a lot of complexity around this area, and so if you've got any great tips and hints, that's part of what we're here for today, is to be able to share. So that's really a constructive part of these webinars, that we can learn from each other. So yeah, do pop top tips in the chat as well as questions. That'd be great. All right, thanks, Catherine. Okay, so what's on the horizon then? And I'm just going to mention 3 things, and I'm not going to speak about this in any detail because, again, this can get quite nuanced. But there are just a couple of things that I'm sure you will all be aware of, which are coming up on the new government's agenda, and these have implications for monitoring, for collecting data, and for sort of evaluating where you are. And these really apply to organisations who are slightly larger, have employers with more than 250 staff. So if I look at that middle column first, ethnicity and disability pay gap. So for a while now, we've had gender pay gap requirements for organisations with over 250 staff. That is being rolled out to cover and require reporting on both ethnicity and disability pay gaps too. And those are going to mirror the gender pay gap reports in terms of what you've actually got to report and how you produce that. And then the second item that I just wanted to flag very briefly is there are some changes around action plans, which are again going to be required for companies, employers with over 250 staff. So on the gender pay gap front, as I say, reporting requirements have been in place for some time now. So if that does apply to you, you will be familiar with those. But there's going to be this new requirement to develop, publish and implement gender pay gap action plans. And then new on the agenda really is around menopause. So again, larger employers are going to be required to produce menopause action plans. So again, in terms of action plans, if you identify actions, you're going to need to evaluate the success of those actions, and you're going to need to measure progress against what you've set out that you say that you're going to do. So that's really all I was going to say about that. There's plenty online in various places if you want to find out more. But we're going to go back to a more generic look at measuring and monitoring and focus on the basics of good practice. Okay, so Catherine, thank you. So the questions that I'm going to touch on, or the themes I'm going to touch on, are on the next slide. Thank you. So firstly, what should you consider measuring? How should you collect data, and how can you use that to give you an insight to what's going on in your organisation? a more niche point, really. How do you assess the impact of your DEI training, which is, I find, a question that people often ask. And more broadly, how can you demonstrate return on investment for DEI activity? So I'm going to talk a little bit there about, what does return mean? Are we just talking about the financial bottom line, or, can we measure maybe or think about return in other ways? And then finally, I'm going to touch on some more sort of subtle signs of progress, because I think sometimes we need to give ourselves a pat on the back and recognise some stuff maybe that doesn't really shine out through data, but it's more about just what you notice is going on in the organisation, which does indicate that the progress is being made, and that can be a little bit more subtle, but it's something that we need to celebrate, and we need to welcome. As I say, we need to give ourselves a pat on the back for making that progress if we're involved in it. Okay, so next slide then. Firstly, what should you consider measuring? And I think, in my mind, and I don't know whether this works for you, but hopefully it does, when I'm thinking about something that I need to do around diversity, equity and inclusion, I tend to take a step back and think, what do I mean by diversity, equity and inclusion? And what are the implications for this new thing that I've got to do? So we know, diversity is about people. It's about types of people. It's about the numbers of people, and it's about identities of people. It's about characteristics. So relating to measuring, monitoring, measuring progress, understanding what this looks like, we need to know who's present in our organisation, who's missing, why is that important for our business, and finally, don't forget intersectionality. So intersectionality is about the fact that we can think about identities or characteristics in a very siloed way. So we can talk about race, we can talk about gender, we can talk about disability, for example, we can talk about sexual orientation, we can talk about religion, for example. But we are not, no one of us is just one of those things. We are a mixture of a lot of those things. And intersectionality recognises that sometimes if we're talking about disadvantage or marginalisation, those characteristics or those identities intersect and overlap, and can accentuate disadvantage, or can produce a different type of disadvantage, or that disadvantage can show up in different ways depending on the intersectionalities that individuals experience, or the intersectionality can be based on groups as well. Okay, so that's about numbers, that's about people. Secondly, we talk about equality or equity in diversity, equality, equity and inclusion. So this is, for me, this is about outcomes. So what are the results of the way in which you do things? What are the results of your policies, your actions, your initiatives? How can you explain if there are any anomalies or different outcomes that you can see? How do people who is promoted, for example, in your organisation, or do performance review results look, when you analyse them, do they look different when you analyse them by different characteristics? So can you explain those anomalies? What do you do? What do you need to do to address those? So in terms of measuring, you need to think about the outcomes as well. And then finally, when we talk about DEI, we think about inclusion, we think about belonging, and this is very much about feelings and experiences. So for staff, what's it like to work here? Do staff experience fair treatment? Do they experience respect? Can they be themselves? Are their experiences positive or negative? Do they experience harassment or discrimination? So that's really about understanding the experiences of different demographic groups with a view to enhancing inclusion and creating that sense and that feeling of belonging. Okay, thanks, Catherine. So we're on the next slide, please. So next up is how do you collect and use your data? So I'm going to touch on GDPR. I'm going to think about monitoring categories, terminology and questions, certain data points. How do you benchmark? What about targets? And, you know, we need to use this data once we've collected it. So in terms of GDPR, this does allow the collection and processing of diversity data with the aim of monitoring equal treatment and the provision of equal opportunities. So it allows us to collect, it allows us to handle, and allows us to use this data for those purposes. It expressly allows the collection of special category data, which is where the sort of protected characteristic data and monitoring falls. I think one of the most important things around to remember in terms of GDPR is that there is an element around consent. A very important thing is that you need to clearly explain what the data you want to collect, what that will be used for, how it will be kept safe once you have it. And so you need to obtain active consent regarding this personal data. So for example, you need to have a tick box on the form, a data monitoring form, to confirm that whoever is submitting that data is happy with the arrangements that you've stated. And under GDPR, individuals, employees also have the right, they have certain rights, such as rights to access the information that's held about them, the right to amend that information, any information that's incorrect, for example, and the right to receive compensation if things go wrong. So you can capture data around characteristics and identities, and I'll talk a little bit more about what those might be, what those characteristics and identities might be in a moment. But you can collect and capture that data in different ways. So you might do a snapshot exercise. So you might go out for one time within a certain period of time. You ask people to submit their characteristics, let you know who they are, and you would use that as a one-time. At this point, this is what our demographics looks like. Secondly, you can ask employees to update their HR records, and this is really the most sustainable way to collect and be able to use this information, as it enables you to monitor key touch points in the employee life cycle going forward. And one-off exercises aren't really as effective as regularly collecting data, as you know, they don't really allow for aggregating information over time, so you can't so much spot trends and patterns. And the third way, which really relates to a different type of data, which is really around more about the feelings, the inclusion aspect, is through staff engagement surveys, and I'm going to just touch on that again in a moment later. But I think whichever option you decide to adopt, the first step for you to think about in capturing this information is you will need to design a data monitoring form. It's really important to ask questions in the right way, because if you phrase things incorrectly, you're going to put people off right at the start. You're going to put people off participating. And developing that standard approach to collecting that data is really good practice to ensure that you are doing it in a consistent way. Okay, so your diversity monitoring forms, and these forms most commonly are designed to monitor the characteristics protected under the Equality Act. But what I would say is, before you just jump in and think, oh, you know, we know there are 9 protected characteristics in the Equality Act, we're going to create a form that captures all these. We want to capture all this information. That's the right thing to do. What you really need to do is carefully reflect on why you're monitoring and what you're going to monitor, and what the information revealed, what's it going to reveal, how is it going to actually be used. You will want to work towards a full suite of data, but this is really can be a step-by-step process. It's really important not just to collect data for the sake of collecting data. For me, that's the worst possible thing. You know, ask people all these questions and then you actually don't do anything with it. That doesn't have integrity. And you need to think about your the culture of your organization and its readiness for these types of activities. You know, some of the characteristics are still seen as more sensitive than others. For example, trans status or sexual orientation. You know, what's going to be the impact of you asking those questions? You're asking people to share that personal and sensitive information about themselves. What's going to be the impact of that? You don't want to shoot yourself in the foot by going a step too far. So take it step by step if you feel that that is the best way forward. You need to build up trust with this. You need to make sure that people are comfortable and that they trust you, how you're going to capture the data, you do it with integrity, you're going to guard it safely, and you're going to use it for some really constructive purposes. You're going to use it for their benefit and for the benefit of the wider organisation. So you don't have to do everything all at once. I mean, just bearing in mind, you know, gender pay gap, ethnicity, disability pay gaps, clearly if those are applicable to you, you do need to capture some of that data. But just think carefully, you know, you don't have to go the full suite right at the start. I think in terms of what and how you capture that data, so the UK census is really helpful to refer to for questions specifically on ethnicity and religion, but it's not as helpful as other areas such as sexual orientation or disability, for example, when you're thinking about exactly what your question will be and what options you provide for people to in the way in which they respond. And my advice would be, in those cases, you need to refer to organisations that have a specific focus, for example, such as Stonewall on sexual orientation questions, and that Stonewall are really good on the monitoring piece. So go for some bespoke and very tailored and specific guidance where you need to. What's important as well, that for each question that you ask, for each category that you monitor on, that you include an option for people to indicate that they don't want to answer the question. So include a prefer not to say option. So this will give you some signal as well about, you know, whether people feel comfortable about sharing that or they don't. And what you can expect is that your response rates to the different questions within your monitoring form will vary across the characteristics, as people may be more comfortable being asked questions on certain topics and certain identities. So don't be surprised if you see that that you're getting different response rates for different areas, or you're getting more prefer not to says for some categories than others. Again, you know, as people build trust in how you store and use the data, you should find that the response rates increase. So, you know, which protected characteristics, as I say, maybe start small, be conscious of culture, but just to flag, and I'm sure you're all aware of this, but the legally protected characteristics under the UK Equality Act relate to age, relate to gender reassignment, being married or in a civil partnership, being pregnant or on maternity leave, disability, race, which includes colour, nationality, ethnic or national origin, religion or belief, sex, and sexual orientation. So you might want to aim at those as a startup to, you know, in small measures, getting to that suite of questions. But organisations are increasingly collecting other types of data or on other aspects as well. For example, socioeconomic background. You know, there's a great interest in social mobility, And also caring responsibilities is the other key one. Also veterans status, for example, is another point to capture potentially, or refugee status as well. I've got a very useful link that we can perhaps share towards the end of the webinar. If you are interested in measuring socio-economic background, the Social Mobility Commission's got a really good toolkit, so we'll put that in the chat at the end of the session, if not before. So make sure as well that your terminology is spot on. So make sure that you are, as I say, using the correct terms to refer to different categories or identities. And I think one good practice tip is provide some guidance maybe on terms that might not be familiar to everyone. If you're giving an option to identify as non-binary, maybe put a little some sort of guidance note and explain what that means, because we may be very familiar with this terminology, but some staff aren't, and they need to be clear about that they're answering the question in the right way. Again, terminology changes with society's views and the context, and again, so it's important to revisit your terminology from time to time to make sure that you're completely up to speed. I mean, I still sometimes get surprised about the kind of the mistakes or the incorrect use of terminology in this piece. And for example, I've seen very recently on monitoring forms or in reports, I've seen English referred to as an ethnicity. I've seen the option of cisgender put under the sexual orientation option, and under a gender categorization I've seen, which, and I was really horrified by this, but I've seen the options given as female, male, and intermediate, which for me is just not very respectful. So, sometimes these things have been written a while ago, and, at one point that was maybe fine, or we weren't so tapped into the nuances and the impact of language. But do go back if you've already got monitoring in place, and review your language and your terminology that way. Okay, the other really important piece is around communicating the reasons for why you're undertaking this activity. Why are you collecting this data? So you want to really reassure people. You want to tell people where and how the data will be kept. You want to say who's going to have access to it. You want to confirm how it's going to be used, and if possible, give concrete examples about how you've used it in the past, or how you aim to use it, how you plan to use it, and how long that information is going to be kept for, how long it's going to be stored, where it's going to be stored, and what is the benefit of this for employees? What is the benefit of them disclosing this information to you? And I think also important is to think about who communicates that. Who do you get on board with your monitoring activity? Who can send out those really important and confirming and reassuring messages about its importance, the importance of this activity, and is going to really encourage people to take part? So, you might think, well, if we get a message from our chief exec, that's going to hit the nail on the head. Everybody's going to take notice and think that it's really important. I'm sure your chief executive is hugely important, but who are the other influences that you're in your organisation? It might be a network chair. If you have trades unions, it might be a trade union person. It might be a diversity champion or ambassador. It could be somebody who isn't quite as senior in the organisation, but who are your real influencers? Who do people really listen to? So I think if you can get that messaging from them. Also, you need to get managers, line managers, and senior leaders on board so that they can help with, communicating. They can answer any questions that team members might have about data collection activity. And then, just make one point: if you collect data, make sure you use it. Analyze it, report it, and use it to make data-informed decisions about what your priorities are, what objectives and goals you're going to set yourself in the DEI space. So how can you use the data that you collect? Use it to identify any bias, any inequities in your policies, practices and culture across the employee life cycle. So this goes back to the outcomes piece that I was talking about before. So your data points might be around attraction, selection, progression, development, exit. So for example, the percentage of underrepresented applicants, the percentage of underrepresented interviewees and of hires, the percentage of underrepresented employees in leadership positions, thinking about pay parity and what that looks like, thinking about promotion, progression rates of majority versus underrepresented groups. And you can also analyse that by level, by role, by business area, parity of performance reviews and attrition rates, who's exiting your organisation, and what does that group of leavers look like in terms of identity, and is there anything there you really need to take account of? And in terms of benchmarking, you can compare your data in several ways, and you've got to pick whatever is most relevant, applicable to you and what it is you're monitoring. So compare with national demographic statistics, compare with industry standards, see how representative you are of your sector, compare with regional representational data, how much, to what extent you reflect the local community. The final point is, if you've already set objectives in the DEI space, how have you met those? Have you met your DEI objectives, the goals that you've set yourself? Okay, I just wanted to mention briefly, we talked a lot about capturing numbers, capturing identities of people, who people are, what they look like. Engagement surveys are really important in terms of how you measure that inclusion piece. And again, you can include DEI related questions either as a one-off survey, or you can make them part of regular staff engagement activity. So you want to explore a variety of things, I think, that sense of belonging, fairness, decision making, leadership, ability, maybe inclusive leadership. Do people see that, experience that? Thoughts and opinions, attitudes to discrimination and harassment, and opportunities that people have maybe for promotion, progression, for training. So just for example, a few questions that you can include. I trust this organisation to treat all employees with fairness. I feel comfortable discussing my background, beliefs, cultural experiences with colleagues. I believe this organisation would take appropriate action if an incidence of harassment or discrimination was reported. The organisation values diverse opinions and ideas, and there are many more. Questions that you can include. But again, think about what it is that you want to explore. Maybe you've got some anecdotal evidence that a particular aspect needs to be looked at in more detail. Okay, and then I just wanted to very quickly measure setting targets. So targets are achievable, they're time-based goals that help you maintain your focus and demonstrate your commitment and demonstrate your progress. And basing targets on analysing that baseline data provides a really solid foundation for achieving them. So again, I think the thing about targets is you have to think very carefully, how does this fit with the culture of my organisation? It's something, target setting does have pros and cons. The upside is that targets, they help you really identify what your organisation is planning to achieve, but they need to be supported by that data that you've collected. They should be achievable, they should be stretching but achievable. Unrealistic targets are really going to, again, shoot you in the foot, and they're unlikely to achieve that beneficial change. But there are some, some cons, some downsides of targets that sometimes aren't really thought through and understood. There is the potential for different groups of employees to see the risks and benefits of targets very differently. So if you aren't traditionally a target-driven organisation, introducing those DEI targets may feel a little bit out of step with the culture, with whatever else is going on. And the other thing, having targets around particular groups of staff, particular demographics, may actually put an unacceptable focus even on employees with marginalised identities. And that may run the risk of generating animosity amongst colleagues. If people don't fully understand and they're not fully behind and aligned with what you're trying to achieve, not necessarily through any fault of their own, through just a lack of understanding, a lack of awareness, by setting targets, you might actually not really be supporting marginalised employees, and it may create a little bit of conflict in the workplace. So it needs to be unique to your particular context before you do choose to adopt targets and measure that progress against them. Okay, so I'm going to move on now. Catherine, if we could go to the next slide, please. Just checking the time. Okay. Yeah, okay. So just wanted to run through something that people often raise. How do you assess the impact of your DEI training? I think in recent years, the effectiveness of DEI training has been more questioned than it was previously. It is very relevant and very appropriate. No reason why it shouldn't be sort of questioned or challenged in a constructive way. Particularly if we're talking about unconscious bias training, it's had a bit of a bad press, and I think also budgets are tighter in society in general. There's an increasing complexity and polarization of views that can make conversations about diversity and inclusion quite challenging. And with all that in view, it's sometimes tempting for organisations to pull back on their training. But we all know that it is important. It's an important part of the DEI suite of activities. But you may be under kind of more pressure to identify that your training is having a positive impact. But it's really difficult, because what we're talking about potentially is we're talking about changing culture, we're talking about changing behaviours, we're talking about surfacing blind spots around bias. This isn't, this is longer term work, and it isn't just, training just doesn't solve all the problems or make all those changes on its own. It's part of a much bigger suite of activity. So we need patience, and that's something that's not always on the table or in our gift. It's also notoriously difficult to demonstrate how that training causes change, the change that you're looking for. We can often show, the data can show that there's some correlation between the training and a change in behaviour, for example, but it's really hard to identify causation. Was the training the actual cause of the change? I think there are just a few things that I want to say here. When you're designing your training, you're thinking about it, make sure that you have thought about how you're going to measure the impact before you start to deliver, right at the start of that design process. And as for any training, it's important really to spell out the aim, the objectives of the training. I do feel with unconscious bias, that's one of the things that was perhaps unfairly critical there. They were saying unconscious bias training doesn't have the impact that it was supposed to have, but that wasn't what it said on the tin, really. Nobody was claiming that certain unconscious bias training was going to change behaviours overnight. It again was part of a package. So you need to spell out the aims and objectives of the training and the reasons that you're embarking on it. Also ensure that training is relevant to your organisation and to the particular participant group, and do think about the trainer. If it's in-person training, is that trainer equipped, confident, skilled to create a safe, inclusive and accessible environment, and that they can accommodate different learning styles. Also, I think there's a piece here about formative and summative evaluation. So I remember doing training sort of theory back many years ago, but I think this is still really relevant. When you're designing your training, part of that evaluation, part of the assessment of its impact and its success is going to be within that design process. So formative evaluation refers to activities conducted during the development process of any training program or product with the aim of improving its quality, whereas summative evaluation is what you do at the end. It's the end, at the end of the product, at the end of the development process. How do you determine its overall effectiveness? And I think within both these activities, you need to think about how are diverse perspectives brought into this evaluation? Whose voices are you asking to hear about, you know, will this training work, or how can we improve it, or what is the outcome of that training be? Again, so often we turn to people who look like us, you know, because of the makeup, our demographics, we suddenly realise that we've got a working group or a design group. We all look the same. We're all the same age, you know, we're all the same background, you know. Bring in diversity, diverse voices, both in formative and that sort of summative evaluation process. Some specific ideas to measure impact or success of training. You can do before and after surveys. You can assess perceptions of knowledge, confidence, awareness, competence. You can do that before. You can have the same survey, the same questionnaire. You ask training participants before they start the training, you know, how confident are you, how skilled are you, what do you know, and then you can do that again after the training. Obviously you get feedback from the learners, but also are you getting feedback from the managers about, you know, what have people taken back into the workplace? How has this made a difference to what people know, understand, how they behave, what skills they have? And also maybe from the direct reports of the learners, you know, what difference has it made? You know, if you've run a course on inclusive leadership, what difference has that made to the direct reports, you know, in terms of what they experience in terms of the inclusive leadership skills of their line manager? Or you can run those as individual interviews, or you can do focus groups. For e-learning, you can do end of course assessments. Those can be right at the end, as I say, or they can actually be woven into the throughout a module. You can set a pass rate for those. You can get reports on how trainees, participants, how they perform. One thing that I think is really insightful and that I've sort of learned to do is where you're delivering a program of training, so you're delivering the same workshop or the same activity more than once, and it's being rolled out more widely across an organisation, is you get your feedback, whatever feedback is you're collecting, but then over time collate that, turn those results into a cumulative report, which then, you know, has more weight, has more authority, and it can help you really to signal some significant changes. So, for example, if you do before and after surveys and you run 10 workshops all the same as part of a wider program, at the end of those 10 workshops, look at all the, you know, summarize, analyze the before questionnaires and analyze the after the post workshop questionnaires, and then compare the two. So you've got a more of a weight of data that you're looking at. Okay, moving on, because I know we're running out of time. So okay, return on investment. Again, you know, sometimes I think this is what people are asked to do. How can you demonstrate the return on investment of what if you're leading on DEI activity? This is really, really tricky, because often it's the context is, you know, financials. How does this affect, the time that you're spending, the money that you're spending, the resource that you're putting into this, again, how is it impacting? How are your actions affecting and impacting positively the bottom line? I think, again, it goes back to that really tricky piece about causation versus correlation. And I think, what I'm going to say is it's not simple. And I'll say again, if anybody's got any good suggestions or top tips here, please do share them in the chat. I mean, I think the return on investment of DEI efforts, you can measure that by evaluating improvements in areas like employee engagement, innovation, increasing market share. You can, some circumstances, quantify cost savings from reduced turnover, better talent acquisition, enhanced business performance, which can be down to creativity or better decision making. But it's really, as far as I'm concerned, sort of nigh on impossible to identify, that what you've done has actually caused those things. I mean, there are some tangible costs that you can identify that are associated with DEI activities. So you can quantify the time, the resources spent on DEI. You can turn that into a financial, and express it in monetary terms. And the impacts can be tangible, but they can be hard to monetize. Like, how do you, again, sort of monetize that customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, the reduced conflicts that you might see at work, improved teamwork, etc. But what the question that comes to me is, what do we mean by return on investment? Often it's seen, as I say, in this sort of financial, the financial impact, but maybe it's more about return in terms of supporting and embedding the principles, the values, strengthening the ethos of your organisation. So maybe we can go back to think about how return can be measured other than financially. How does it stack up against those things, culture, ethos, values instead? So if your question on return on investment, think about what does return mean? It can mean more broadly than the financials. Okay, finally then, final slide, Catherine, please. I just wanted to mention some more subtle signs of progress and success that sometimes we may gloss over, we may not really notice. But I think, we need to, as I said at the start, we need to sort of pat ourselves on the back. This can feel a bit like a never-ending journey. So maybe you notice things like senior buy-in, senior behaviours changing, maybe the leaders in your organisation who are majority identity, maybe they start to use their privilege, their platform to speak about diversity, equity, inclusion. Maybe you see them being more confident with inclusive leadership behaviours. Maybe they support the work of staff networks. Maybe they encourage team members to get more involved. That is a sign of progress. That is a sign of making impact in terms of the actions that have been taken. Your diversity monitoring declaration rates. I mentioned that sometimes these look different for different characteristics, but maybe the rates are going up over time. That is a really good sign that people are more confident. There's a keener sense of belonging and inclusion. They have more confidence that data will be stored and used appropriately, and they're more willing to share that it's going to be used for the benefit of everyone. Thirdly, I think representation of diversity in comms, marketing, and events. This is an interesting one for me. Maybe you're asked to speak on panels, but you suddenly realise there's a lack of diversity on that panel, or have efforts been made to ensure that there is diverse representation and the people on the panel don't all look and sound the same. That is very much progress as well, because it's an understanding within that particular business area of what can be achieved in terms of better inclusion. And finally, just generally noticing more people getting involved, wanting to talk about bias, microaggressions, privilege, sharing experiences and information about their own culture. Attendance at staff networks meetings goes up, for example, and maybe people are more willing to constructively challenge, to be allies and to be active bystanders. So I think, you know, there are lots of ways that we can measure impact. It doesn't always have to be, or we can see impact. It doesn't always have to be numbers on a page. So think about it holistically, and I'm sure you'll really find something to give you confidence that your actions are making an impact. Okay, so I'm going to leave it there. Thank you. We're really out of time.
Yeah, you've not given me much time for this last bit, but we'll
sorry, Catherine.
It's okay, we'll get through it. And in the meantime, while I'm nattering on, could you just have a look through the questions and see if there's any that you want to pull out for our Q&A that we really should get to? Thanks to everyone who sent in questions so far and responded to each other. That's really brilliant. So looking at how Ciphr can support your DEIB efforts, we provide a range of off-the-shelf e-learning courses that are ready to deploy in your LMS straight away, or we can help you out with an LMS. They come in full length and also micro-learning options. So whether you're looking for something that is really comprehensive, or perhaps a suite of content, or something that's just a 15-minute bite size, we have options available there. We also offer tailored bespoke e-learning content. You can work with our consultants such as Anne to tailor these off-the-shelf courses to your needs, or we can design completely bespoke content. And again, those can be individual courses or like whole programs of learning, depending on your requirements. The tailoring could be things ranging from your branding and your colorways to specific terms that you use, or tailoring for your industry as well. We also offer effective facilitated training. Those are both in-person or virtual options for large or small teams, and clients often use these interactive action-focused sessions as complements to e-learning courses, so creating a whole program of blended learning for you. And finally, Anne leads our audit and analysis practice. I know she's working on a few of these projects at the moment to get an independent perspective on your current activities, policies and practice. She'll help you identify strengths and weaknesses and create a report that offers a roadmap of priorities and goals for the future. And I think one of the clients you're working with now, Anne, you did one of these plans for them a few years ago, and they've re-engaged you, and you're now looking at the progress they've made over that period of time to get an understanding on what the work is left still to do. Yep, good. Anne's nodding. I've got it right. Good.
Sorry. Yeah.
Excellent. So as I mentioned, we offer a range of courses, and we are happy to offer everyone on this call an exclusive free trial of our DEI Change Agent micro-learning course. This is a 15-minute course designed for those who support DEI activities and strategies such as D&I ambassadors, champions and advocates. Simply hit the button on your screen now to opt in, and we'll arrange the trial for you. Learning outcomes for the course includes being able to explain key DEI topics, reflecting on your role as a change agent, supporting and encouraging colleagues to think and act inclusively, challenging behaviour that is discriminatory or that excludes others, and considering personal actions to increase your effectiveness in your role. So don't miss out. If you want to do that, please hit the button that should be on your screen now. As just to offer you a quick recap, we looked at the theme of this year's National Inclusion Week, which is understanding, identifying and measuring impact on marginalised groups and taking actions that create genuine sustainable change. We looked at the fact that there's potentially lots of change coming soon to legal requirements to measure and report on DE&I metrics for organisations of more than 250 employees. None of that draft legislation has been released as of yet. We're expecting that to come out in the autumn. So do keep an eye on the news, or follow us on LinkedIn. We're just at Ciphr over there, and we will keep you informed as best we can as soon as more information comes out. Anne shared 5 questions to shape your measurement activity, and they're on your screen for you now. And I also just shared really quickly how we can help with e-learning, facilitated training, consultancy and more, including that free trial, which I think is still active. So I've run through that as quick as I can. And are there any questions that you wanted to particularly bring out of the chat just to touch on before we close? Because I realise we are really on the wire here.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, there was just one question really. I mean, I can is there any way I can go back to individuals who've raised particular questions?
You can just scroll up the chat list to head back to them. There's no separate function.
Okay, I mean, there's just one question that Lisa said, well, she said her challenge is the lack of data due to restrictions in place in some of the countries in which we have employees. This means data doesn't give the full picture on which to make accurate assessments and informed decisions. We're planning to launch anonymous and optional DEI service and that. I think, you know, I worked with a sort of non-governmental, I can't remember what they're called, like Wango organisation who worked globally. You know, and I know this is for global organisations, this is a real challenge because indeed you've got to be really careful that you can't apply the same principles that I've just talked about. Probably should have made that clear at the start, you know, that we're talking about the UK here, because in different parts of the world it becomes very complex. There are different rules and laws in place. You know, in some places you can't even ask the questions, some places you can ask but you can only capture and store the data in a certain way, and you can only use it for specific circumstances and purposes. So it's really complicated and it's not a one size fits all. But I would say, you know, I think if you do want to find out more about impacts or challenges or measurement in different countries where you aren't so free to ask the type of questions that we've talked about around identity, you know, the way to do it probably is through you know, engaging with individual employees and trying to get confidence about people, you know, using focus groups and using that type of methodology rather than asking people to identify themselves. So it's more about their experiences and their feelings rather than identifying their particular characteristics and recording that some way. But yeah, it is absolutely a challenge. Yeah, but you do have to be careful. Okay, thank you.
Brilliant, thanks, Anne. I think we've just about run out of time for questions, and I'm so sorry we didn't leave enough time for a Q&A. And you have so much to share with us that by the time we get to Q&A, we've kind of run out of time. So I think next time we do one with you, looking at DEI, and we should allow a little bit of a buffer. That's a lesson learned. But we really appreciate you joining us. If there are any particular things that we've touched on today that you'd love more information about, there's a feedback survey at the end of this broadcast. You can just share with us what you'd like us to look at in future webinars, and we can consider building those into our programme for either later this year or into 2025. If you want to learn more about any of our solutions, including our e-learning courses, you can opt in using the exit form on your screen after the broadcast, or you can email us at info@ciphr.com. Just to confirm, this whole session has been recorded and we will send out the recording via email to you, hopefully later today. There's no further action you need to take. Finally, thank you, Anne, for sharing your wealth of expertise. I always appreciate you joining us for these webinars. Thank you to everybody for joining us live today and for being so helpful and courteous in the chat. That really helps, and great to see that so many of you engaged with the content and found it useful. That's all from us today. Take care, and we hope to see you at another Ciphr webinar again soon. Thanks so much. Bye.
Bye now. Bye.